Although being honored for his ongoing role in the promotion of the four-string banjo, let there be no mistake. Eddy Davis is a banjo performer of the highest stature. His high-profile international appearances in the world of jazz and theater have brought with great distinction the music of the four-string banjo to a worldwide audience of literally millions. However, as the motivation for much of his musical activity has been focused on introducing the banjo to a broad, mainstream audience outside of the familiar banjo community, Eddy Davis has evolved into a one-of-a-kind banjo artist with a career story unlike any other. Eddy, with a Y, was born in Indiana in 1940 and grew up literally on the banks of the Wabash. Musically, his first inspiration came from early jazz recordings, which intrigued the youngster with their unique beat and feel. While he'd played around with a mandolin, he received no formal musical training until high school, where his natural musical curiosity drove him to learn to play every instrument in the band. Amidst the nostalgia craze of the mid-1950s, many colleges had Dixieland jazz bands. Nearby Purdue University's entry into the category was known as the Salty Dogs, and although he was still in high school, Eddy really wanted to be part of the band. When informed that the only position open was that of the banjo player, Davis replied, "What's a banjo?" Undaunted by this intellectual shortcoming, with the rental of an awful K-tenor banjo and some hasty lessons, Eddy Davis began his lifelong banjo odyssey as a member of the Salty Dogs. Unhappy with the lack of a music curriculum at Purdue, Davis followed the Salty Dogs to Chicago, where in addition to performing, he began a serious study of music theory and composition at both the Cosmopolitan Conservatory of Music and the Chicago School of Music. While this educational tack satisfied his serious musical interest by day, Eddy's love of jazz and performing was filled by night in Chicago's infamous Rush Street Entertainment District. There he saw jazz greats such as Louis Armstrong and Jack Teagarden perform while taking breaks from his own shows at the Gaslight Club. Tempted by an opportunity to lead his own band, Eddy left the Gaslight Club to take up musical residence in Chicago's Bourbon Street. Although originally hired to be the relief band for headliner Bob Scobie and his Frisco Jazz Band, Eddy's band ultimately became the club's headline attraction. Firmly entrenched in Rush Street's Dixieland jazz scene, Eddy's band bounced between clubs such as Bourbon Street, the Velvet Swing, and Mr. Kelly's by night, while he completed his musical education during the day. In 1967, his schooling complete, Eddy began a nomadic existence which would define the next 10 years of his life. A musical free spirit, Davis would, in his words, head wherever the wind would blow and the gigs sounded interesting. After opening a club near Disneyland called the Fire Station Inn, Eddy was asked to join the national touring company of Hello Dolly, where he performed in the orchestra with Betty Grable, Ginger Rogers, or Eve Arden on stage in the title role. That show's success led to another great Jerry Herman musical, Mame, in which Eddy played in both the New York and touring company orchestras. Lighting in Chicago, Eddy established a new act called Banjos Unlimited while continuing to appear nightly in Mame. He then traveled to New York, where he worked for several months at a popular banjo room called the Red Onion, before heading to Disneyland in California, where he played soprano saxophone with banjoist Buck Kelly as part of Disney's Class of '27 show. This whirlwind of eclectic activity continued as Davis worked as a musical director for Joan Namath, was part of the Your Father's Mustache road shows, started a new show band called Whiz Bang, toured with Stanley's Washboard Rhythm Kings, worked summers in Las Vegas with piano showman Big Tiny Little, and played at the Red Garter in Florence, Italy. Shaking off the dust of the road, Eddy settled down in New York City and began putting his formal musical training to work. Again becoming very serious about music, 1976 saw Eddy doing orchestrations and conducting for a new musical entitled The Life and Times of Warren G. Harding. Later, Davis was the musical director for a revival of the 1920s musical Whoopee. He made recordings with Leon Redbone, Jabbo Smith, Turk Murphy, and other jazz greats, accompanied Patti LaBelle on the soundtrack of the film Fried Green Tomatoes, made numerous stage appearances with actor George Segal, and, as if all this weren't enough, in his spare time, Eddy began an ongoing labor of love via his transcription and arrangements of hundreds of ragtime and early jazz works, as well as writing hundreds more original Eddy Davis compositions.
Please do it. Even educated, please do it. Let's do it.
As busy as his more serious projects kept him, Eddy had great fun as the driving force behind the New York Society for the Preservation of Illegitimate Music. This review, based on the comic and complex musical arrangements of Spike Jones and the City Slickers, brought national attention to both Davis and Jones via a feature article in People magazine and several national television appearances. Always looking for new and different ways to present the banjo, Davis conceived the New York Banjo Ensemble, which, in its original form, included Cynthia Sayer, Howard Alden, and Frank Vignola, playing a complete family of banjo instruments, from bass banjo to piccolo banjo, all in an orchestral setting. Seemingly omnipresent in the 1990s, Eddy worked to establish his New York Jazz record label while composing original music for the Big Apple Circus, a New York entertainment institution. He continued to play jazz concerts, festivals, and cruises throughout the world, and in 1994 returned to the theater as the musical director and featured performer in a German theatrical production called Jazz Legs. While an accurate accounting of all of Eddy Davis's activities in the world of jazz could never be complete, the task could not be attempted without noting his highlight activity with internationally known filmmaker and jazz clarinetist Woody Allen. Their friendship began in Chicago in the 1960s, when Allen would sit in with Eddy's band on Rush Street between his own stand-up comedy shows. Later, as residents of New York with similar musical tastes, their personal and professional relationship grew to become the Eddy Davis New Orleans Jazz Band with Woody Allen. Note that Allen often graciously gives Eddy credit for being the band leader, simply considering himself a high-profile member of the group. However, it is Allen's celebrity status which draws much attention to the band and fills concert halls around the world. Ultimately a win-win situation for the banjo through his live personal appearances with Woody Allen, as well as both on- and off-screen appearances in Allen's films, most notably the award-winning documentary Wild Man Blues. Eddy Davis has been able to bring the four-string banjo to a massive worldwide audience who may never have otherwise been exposed to the instrument. As Eddy Davis continues his unique musical journey, he has hopeful optimism for the future of the banjo. In his words, "The banjo will certainly always have a place as a joyful-sounding bit of musical Americana. But I, for one, would love to see the banjo elevated to the level of acceptance it knew as a musical instrument back in the 1920s. To accomplish this, we must think bigger than just the banjo. Certainly, by itself, the banjo is a wonderful instrument. However, I've enjoyed my biggest success when my banjo playing has been an essential part of a larger picture or production. Try to imagine Hello, Dolly or Mame without the characteristic part of the banjo being played with that distinctive sound and feel. It's pretty hard. I believe that making the most of any opportunity, past or future, to present the banjo to a national mainstream audience is the best hope of it staying alive and progressing as an instrument into the future.